All right, welcome back to Smallie Chaser channel. We're going to talk a little bit about crayfish, crawfish, mud bugs, whatever name you want to use and put to it. But there's some things that you need to know. And there's a lot of information out there that may or may not be applicable to where you're fishing, especially if you're river bassin in the mid-Atlantic region. And so there are a couple things that you want to know. Okay, so I'm going to break this down. It's basically 5 or 6 things that you really need to know about your crawfish. And the reason why you want to know these things is because if you're traveling throughout your region, these while behaviors may be similar, there are changes to the different species that having that knowledge is going to help you in terms of targeting smallmouth bass in your river fishery, okay? And a lot of that all depends on, just like everything else, smallies need to eat. And, for the most part, during certain times of year, coming up shortly, during the crawl break, crawfish become the predominant resource for them to feed up on. And then at other times of the year, later in the year, it may not be crawl. It may be more forage, maybe more shiner, more minnow, darter, sculpin, that kind of stuff. Goby if you're further up, those kinds of things, okay? And so it's really, really important to understand really not only the behavior of your smallie and how it goes through pre-spawn into spawn, then post-spawn, then its summer pattern, then its fall, late summer, then fall transition and winter patterns, right? We kind of hear that all the time. We hear about patterns and transitions and things like that. But you also really want to understand the behavior of actually what your smallies are feeding on. And a lot of you might be surprised. I know definitely a lot of you guys up north may be surprised. Is I just saw crawl this morning, okay? And so we're not even, halfway through March yet, and there's crawl out. There's been crawl out in February, okay, in the Mid-Atlantic. So what is it that predicates that? Well, there's a couple myths out there. And one of the major things you need to know is crawfish do not, quote unquote, hibernate like a lot of people kind of tell you. They don't hibernate, okay? They may go dormant because of water temperatures, because they certainly like a certain range, same way smallies like to spawn in a certain range, 55 to 65 degree water, right? Largemouth bass, maybe in the lower part of that range, depending on where you are. But all these species have a preferred water temperature, and they have a preferred water clarity, okay? And so begin to think, because we don't see them out in the wintertime, okay, that they're hibernating. No, they're dug down, they're keeping warm, but they're still, if you had a high water event like we had in the Mid-Atlantic in or around January 10th, I think it was, 10th to 15th, you saw crawl in places like the Monocacy. Why is that? Because the high water event stirs up the banks, stirs up, moves rocks, moves things where they've hunkered down, and slowed everything down for them because of the water temperature to conserve energy, right? And all that stuff. And it stirs it all up, and so they get out. They get active again, and that's why we saw them. We've seen them. And so one of the things you need to know is the hibernation thing is really a myth, okay? It just doesn't really happen, all right? They have a preferred water temperature just like smallmouth do, largemouth do, all your fish and bait fish do, certain minnows, shiners like cold water, some like warm water, all those things, okay? So that's the first thing. Location is the second thing. Where are the crawl located in your river? Why can you go through sections of the river and never seeing any crawl, and then you come upon a spot and they just seem to be readily available in droves for the smallies to feed on? And I want to liken this to, why are the smallies roaming in the pre-spawn? Okay? They're roaming to find food, okay, to feed up for the spawn, right? So they're out searching, locating areas in which that phenomenon is happening. Because your crawl is not going to be predominantly a 5-mile stretch of crawfish. It just doesn't happen that way. So you want to be able to identify those areas where crawl are going to be prolific. It could be history, Oh, I always have my notebook to mark down where I'm seeing excessive amounts of crawfish, and I always check that place the next season. Okay? I always look at my riverbanks. I always look for those like almost like woodpecker holes, right? That are everywhere, right? Okay? Because those are crawfish burrows, okay? And here's an interesting tip for you that I want you to do this year, mid spring, late spring, when we begin to see a lot more crawl. Depending on what the water temperature, we're still in the low 50s, around 50. So it's still on that cusp. When we get to 55, we're going to see a lot of changes happening in our rivers. Okay, if you're in Maryland or you're in Virginia, I want you to stop. I want you to go and check out your riverbank that's predominantly accessed by humans. Okay, meaning like I have a towpath, that goes right along the Upper Potomac. Okay, that's readily accessible to humans for bank fishing, shoreline fishing, kayak access. Right, people just hiking. People like okay. And the next time you're out in the water, go to the opposite bank on an island. Okay, an island in the middle of your river. Doesn't have to be a big island. Just has to be, a sedimentary fixture of composition in there. And go and check how many holes there are in there. And you're going to find is a lot of people are looking at the wrong bank. Okay, they're throwing jigs and everything up in the wrong areas when they should be looking towards the islands that have anything that has like a steeper run drop to the water, where the water level rises against it and lowers against it, and you're going to see hundreds of those holes. Why? Because predominantly they can stay there and be undisturbed, okay, by us, by anything, okay? Predation, okay, any kind of animal digging, okay? So check that out this year. Go to your mid-islands, mid-range islands, and just kind of go around them and kind of look and see if you see those holes. If you see those holes now, there's going to be crawl in that area in the coming weeks, okay? Understand that we've also been sold a lot kind of goods, I say, about crawl before rock, right? It's not exactly true. Now, they are around rocks, but a lot of times it's out of necessity. Rocks provide shelter, safety, and security, okay, from things above. They predominantly, are bottom dwellers, okay? But a lot of that is out of necessity. But what you're going to find is these crawfish will be in creeks, swamps, ditches, lakes, ponds. Some will be in muddy and sandy substrate. Some will be in clear water. Depends on the species, okay? And so knowing the species, again, location. Location is not only where you're finding your crawl in your river system. Location is also what's the native or non-native range. Non-native is invasive, like a rusty crawl. Okay. Maryland and Virginia have plenty of non-native crawl now. Okay. Maryland is just now starting to see signs of the rusty crawl coming down from Pennsylvania down into northwestern Maryland, up there, working its way down. Okay. And so that's an interesting tidbit of information. Pennsylvania has their rusty crawl invasion in their watersheds of like the Susquehanna and all of that, which has kind of wreaked a lot of havoc on native populations. And has affected the population density of that crawl. And so knowing your species, okay, knowing the native range of your species also allows you to understand what the coloration patterns are going to be. That is the third thing you should know, is the actual color cycle of a crawfish. Okay, Maryland, Virginia, I'm pretty sure they're in Virginia too now. Maryland has one of its 14 or so crayfish species that's even remotely red. Just one of the 14. And that's the red swamp crawl. Okay? That's it. All right? It's not even located all over the state. Okay? And so you've got areas of where its range is predominantly closer to DC. Okay? and then out towards the east of the bay. Okay, it's the only of the 14 or so species that you're going to come across in Maryland that's going to be the traditional sold to you. Throw red in the spring. Okay, throw red, Okay, that whole red myth is a big box retail marketing ploy. It is. If you're out fishing in Virginia and Maryland and even West Virginia, and a lot of times parts of Pennsylvania, because Rusty has some red in it, but it doesn't get all red. Okay, there's very few of the species, and most of the ones that are red, okay, are non-native. They were brought here. They were brought up and used for bait and used for other purposes, introduced into our ecosystems. Okay, so they're not native. All right. And so that's an important distinction to know that if you're out throwing. My argument has always been, they haven't been seeing anything from December, January, February. You get out in March and spring, the weather pops, and we start throwing lipless crankbaits, and we start throwing cranks and all this stuff. And it's really more about the noise, the action, the thump, than the color. In my opinion, I know people have other opinions about that. It's just my experience that it really doesn't matter. And when you look at your native ranges of your crawl, if you take the upper Potomac system and you've got crawl that are only in the Yock, okay, two species in Maryland are only in the Yock watershed, okay, up Garrett County, up that way, okay. You've got species like the Allegheny, which is kind of like had its kind of range come under pressure, Spiny Cheek, you got another one, which is predominantly this color, okay, which is probably the one I come across the most, okay, in the upper Potomac. It's more of a brown and cream belly, okay, so that is what you get. Now, when you get out there in the next couple weeks, guys, I don't care where you are, other than the red swamp, especially these juvenile crawls, okay, they're going to be molting, okay? That's number 4, is understanding that molting process of your crawl. The juveniles will molt continually as they grow. Adult crayfish don't molt as much, right? So the juveniles will continue to molt, meaning they are going, to their exoskeleton, shed their skin, okay? Shed their shell, okay? And so almost all these little things, again, that you're going to see in the next couple weeks are going to be this color, okay? They're going to be more of a green with a little brown in them early on, okay? And then as that water temperature rises, they begin to eat, okay? They begin to feed, again, omnivores, right? They're eating plants and insects and their own shells. Most people don't understand that. Yes, crawfish will shed their shell and then eat it, okay? Crazy, but it's true, all right? And all that kind of happens at that 52 to 55 range we start to see, and then we start to see this explosion as we get into April, May, and into summer and all that kind of stuff. And again, a lot of it is predicated on the species, the water temperature, and the water clarity. Some of the crawl really like clear water. Some of the crawl prefer muddy water, okay? It's just that's how that kind of rolls, with that. And so we've got these various species in our region, and how we target them and the methods, if you think about it, what are some of the methods that we use? Like if you would, I would say crawl is the dominant option of coloration, color pattern, right? That we see in everything. Because we can get it in hard baits, okay? Get it in hard baits like this, okay? We can get it in soft baits from 6 cents here, Divine paddle tails. Look, that's a crawl pattern, right? We'll get it in chatterbaits, okay? Crawl colorations, jigs, definite crawl colorations, okay? Orange, that kind of stuff, orange, all that. That's again, store-bought aisle. Here you go, not a custom crankbait. Okay, this is not a custom crankbait. That's just a store-bought crankbait for this video. Boom. Or, red, fire red, Table Rock red, Toledo Bend red, whatever the coloration is they want to sell, right? And then we've got our, soft plastics, okay? So, again, what colors are they? They're always shades of orange, red, looking like crawl, okay? It is a predominant forage species as well as a predominant marketing bait at big box stores, right? For everyone to get on because most people generally have access to crawl. Now, if you're fishing in a lake that doesn't have crawfish, you can still catch fish on a red colored crankbait, okay? Or any color crankbait, right? Doesn't mean you're going to catch as many, but you're still do it because of that resource. Now, understand that as much as crayfish are predators as well, like I said before, and you're going to find them in grass just like you will the smallies. So the smallies are there because the cray are there, and the cray are there because the insects are there. If you find grass, you're going to find a quality and abundance of all of this in a healthy river system because it's all symbiotic in terms of how they relate to one another. Now, the smallies may not stay there, but they're going to be moving in, moving out, moving in. They'll be middle river right now, getting ready to move towards shallower areas in their roaming, in their pods, while the cray begin to pop up. All right? And so some of the other things like what's techniques, crankbaits, tubes, jigs, right? Those are predominantly your dominant players when it comes to why you're throwing those things. Is you're throwing those to mimic, crawfish, and depending on where you are fishing, is a big determinator really on whether or not is this going to be effective, and this is a highly effective bait. Okay. Highly effective coloration pattern. It's got a little bit of everything. Got a little bit of red, more of the orange, more of the creamy brown, the green pumpkin. Remember, green pumpkin's the most green pumpkin, black and blue. Green pumpkin is probably the most popular color pattern sold across the board. All right? Why? What has green pumpkin tones to it in your fishery? Crawl. Okay? Right? Also a little bit of bait fish and stuff like that. Black and blue. Here's my Tidal Potomac jig, black and blue. Primary feature for crawl or blue crabs, okay, Upper Bay, Potomac watershed, all right, black and blue. I don't throw a black and blue, very rarely do I throw a black and blue jig on, say, the Upper Potomac, okay, or say the Shenandoah, okay, or the Monocacy. I just don't. I throw these colorations, okay, or jig that's this color, okay? Because this is more indicative of the colors. Green, see that green in there? Green, brown, gold, okay? Of the crawl, just no kind of different than this, right? In terms of the coloration patterns. And so that's what you want to think of. Now, if I'm going big, I want to go big, then I'm going to a custom painted, big time, big O crankbait in crawl, okay? When they're feeding up, because they're feeding up. They want something boom to munch on, okay? And so I'll go to a big O as opposed to, with the size difference on that, all right? Patterns, again, and then in the intermediate and mid-spring, in terms of this, if I've seen them, I'm kicking rocks over. Don't ever sleep on logs or trees, especially after floods. These trees come down, they get lodged, they become permanent structure on your river. Happens in the Upper Potomac all the time. Okay, they become the next season structure. And you get out there, maybe you get out of your kayak and you kind of just rock that thing, and you see like all the crawl, they're on the bottom, they're moving out because they're hunkering down underneath that log, okay? Waterlogged log, rotted logs, all that kind of stuff, okay? It's not just rock, okay, in terms of, river system locations of where you're going to locate the crawl, okay? And and that's predominantly when, you know that the smallies are going to be feeding head down, okay? Head down is they're looking at an angle down towards the bottom to feed. You guys have seen tons of videos, okay, of what happens, right? They're not necessarily looking up for maybe top water on that given day during this time frame. That does not mean they're not going to be attracted to that. Does not mean that they're not going to be, acclimated to that. What I'm saying is when they know that there's crawl forage on the bottom river composition, they're kind of angled down. So you want to get, that's why drop shot is so effective in a lot of lakes for smallies, like Jennings Randolph, places like that. Okay. My Little Seneca Lake for largemouth bass, drop shot, highly effective because they tend to be aligning and relating to the bottom more than the top of the water column. And in river systems, that's not a big depth. You could be in really, really skinny water. I mean, under a foot of water in a lot of our rivers. Okay, up and down, everywhere. Crawler's still there. How are you going to target them? Okay, and this is where you want to play on that bottom. Okay, so this is a crawl. Okay, you want to play on that movement on the bottom. All right, along through those rocks, stuff like that. Okay, and here's one where I got red, a lot more red on it. Okay, when I see that happening, so I got two options there that I want to use, and then of course I'm gonna roll. My favorites are like just standard small. People call them micro jigs. They're just small jigs. I prefer hair jigs a lot of times throughout the year. Micro jigs, smaller jigs. See how they still have that pack crawl, so they can still stand up, move. Okay. Then the next size up, still a play, okay, on that brown, gold crawl, kind of green pumpkin, brown, watermelon candy style, okay, green pumpkin. Also more like, even like more closer to like shiner color with a gold in there, okay, to kind of double dip here. And then I'll also go, because you're going to find, like I said, these creamy bottoms, okay, on some of these crawl, right? Love that white, okay? My small jig mimics the size. As I'm moving it, this coloration pattern, okay, has that belly of that crawl, okay? And that's why they're really, really, really highly effective, all right? And so you've got that, okay, kind of like in your head to understand what you're looking at in your river system, okay? Educating yourself not only on your smallmouth, but on the crawl. What's the behavior of the crawl? Where are they going to be today? I'm going to locate them first, okay? If you know you're going out in pre-spawn areas right now, the water temperature is above 50, you know the smallies are beginning to move out of their winter haunts, you want to locate their winter haunts, right? Okay, you should have already located them. They're deeper holes, right? During the wintertime, if you're out winter fishing. If you located them, start there and work your way through your transition lines and your moves, your parallel lines, okay, from the deeper holes. You're going to locate your smallmouth. And when you locate them smallmouth, you're going to be locating a resource because they have moved slowly out of their wintering holes, or it could be depressions or below ledges. It doesn't have to be like when people say holes, it could be a deviation of like a half a foot of water in a lot of rivers, okay? I mean, it just has to be a deviation, okay? Because they're getting down, they want the thermal of that rock. As the water temperature begins to rise, they need that rock less for the thermal. They can move out, they can go feed, and so you want to go back to that hole and then move around, okay, off of those areas, upriver or downriver. You are going to find that in the pre-spawn, your smallies will move anywhere from 2 to 3 miles, okay? Because they're waking up, so to speak, as the whole ecosystem wakes up. We've experienced high water events in the Monocacy, in the Upper Potomac, in the James River, in the Shenandoah, lesser extent on the New River, okay? The last month and a half. It's changed the complexion. Now, the river will settle back down, it always does, but it's changed the complexion. It stirred some stuff up. It may have removed grass, okay? There were early grass that may have started a little bit. You couldn't see it, but it was still starting. It may have pushed that downriver. The smallies are going to be moving to locate that stuff again in air, and they'll set up on the areas pre-spawn, okay, to feed, and then the males will then begin to transition to locating areas for them to make the beds and for the females to follow them, okay? But in that process, from pre-spawn to spawn, they're going to be feeding on targets of opportunity in those lanes, okay? The water still going to be in the low 50s. They're not going to be sitting in that current, okay? They're going to be off that current, all right? They're still not going to want to exert a lot of energy right now, but they want to be able to hit what that current brings it as a target of opportunity. So just keep that in mind. That current thing will happen a little bit later on. They want to get cool because a lot of times that current is colder water, okay? Now, obviously, these things do not apply to every single river system or every single out there. Everything is confined to your river system and how some of these things may apply to you. Your river may churn water, may pull water from 60, 80 feet, cold water up in a dam and release it. Well, that changes the dynamic of your system. That changes everything. That changes your water clarity. That changes the overall temperature of your fishery. That may change your spawn. It may push it back further. It may delay transitions. All that stuff comes into play. So this is why it's important for you to be out on your river throughout the year and be a student of the river. Your river will tell you everything you need to know about catching fish if you listen to it. More so than YouTube, more so than this schmuck on YouTube, more so. Your river will tell you where the fish are going to be. Your river will tell you what the smallies are feeding on, okay, and what they want, all right? Once you get out there and once you locate them and you realize this isn't working, okay, they're going to tell you. You just have to have the mindset that you're willing to listen and read the overall ecosystem that you're fishing in. Leave it as you left it, okay, but see it, dial it in, okay, and then break it down section by section on the differences of that. Some of your sections are going to be rock. Some of them are going to be grass. Some of them are going to be shell bed. Some of them. So how did the bass set up different, right? Are they setting up on the opposite islands? Are they setting up on the island points or secondary points? Are they setting up, if you're a lake, if you're fishing for a lake, where are they setting up? What are the differences? Okay, from season to season that you're going to track these smallies throughout your river system. Okay. And that stuff helps you when you go to new places and you just kind of sit and look and you have a subjective analysis on, okay, in my river back home, this is how I see it. So whenever I go to a new river, I always see that river through the lens of my river, okay? Even though it's brand new, okay? I always see it through that lens of experience from my river and take initially those things, because smallies are smallies, okay? Take things to apply to that. Again, the forage size could be different. It could be more bait fish than crawl sometimes, so you want to make sure you pack that, okay? But you definitely want to make sure that you have more than just this, okay? Color, okay? You want to make sure that you have a depth of colors, all right, and actions working together, all right? Okay, throughout the season, from spring to summer to fall, okay? And then we get into fall, a lot more red, okay? A lot more healthier crawl. They've eaten a lot of stuff. They've got a lot of iron. They got all that stuff, okay, in their shells, okay? They're not molting as much because they're bigger, and then you tend to get that, all right? And so that stuff will help you break down the things that you need to know about crawl, okay? So the dormancy versus hibernation, okay? The location, all right, of the coloration patterns of, okay? The forage sublimation. Remember, the crawl are also predators, okay? So that ties to location. So grass, rock, logs. Don't sleep on these areas. Don't sleep on small, shallow creeks for many of these species, especially in Maryland and Virginia. They prefer the creeks and the streams to the river, okay? And they prefer those environments, or the mouths, or all of those areas, as opposed to the swift running current, okay, of say a Susquehanna, right? Excuse me. And then the molt, and understanding how that's going to change what happens along with that growth process of your crawfish. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Again, these are some things that you need to know, things that you consider. Please comment any of the things that you've noticed in your fishery. If you're already seeing crawfish, put that in the comments. Let us know. Because it's almost, we're getting closer and closer as we get to that time where it is going to be actually crawl break, and we're going to see an abundance of crawl break out and be in our river systems. And we can hopefully this season we'll be back to where you can't step anywhere in the river wade fishing without seeing crawfish. We want to get back to those population densities. All right.